Come on, sing it again. We are here in your presence on holy ground. Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. We are truly on holy ground. You know, the holy ground that Deborah talked about, that we hear about with Deborah in the reading. We hear about Philippians, and that was holy ground. And every single place that we walk and that we travel along is holy ground. I think I've shared with you that I have a spiritual director who tried to help me to find something that would help me truly connect with God in every moment. And one of the things that we found for me is to place my feet on the ground and really acknowledge that that ground is holy. And so that's why I take my shoes off when I sing that, because for me it is about really connecting with God and allowing God to speak through me. And so this morning, Deborah the gender bender is who we're talking about. I wanted to take a look at Deborah, who is a mighty woman. If you haven't heard about her, then read the book of Judges. She was a woman who was a prophetess. She was a judge. And she lived in a time where perhaps that wouldn't be the norm. And this week is Transgender Day of Remembrance. And we have a time of remembering on Wednesday. And when I was thinking about the amount of, usually women, but there are a couple of gender non-conforming and male who have died at the hands of hate and discrimination, it dawned on me that it's about these gender norms that we put on everybody, because that's what we're told. So I did a little bit of research, as I do, into what other people think that the gender norms are of the Bible. And I was horrified. I was horrified, but I don't know why I expected anything different. But I read so many places that and don't get any ideas, guys, that the women should submit to the man at all times, in leadership, in marriage, in everything else, because God said so and Jesus said so. I struggled to actually find any passage that said that. Human beings may have said it, but I don't believe Jesus or God said that. But we assign roles to people, and Jonathan and I had an interesting conversation about this a week or so ago. That when we see somebody or they do a certain thing, then we assign them a role. Maybe they're camp, maybe they're butch. You know, a short-haired woman who identifies as gay must be a butch lesbian. If they wear lipstick, they're a lipstick lesbian. If they're in a cisgender straight marriage, the man must be the breadwinner. Is that not right? No. What do you reckon? The era that Deborah journeyed this earth in was an era where they had people telling them what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. So really, this was 550 BC. So nearly 3,000 years ago, and we still haven't changed. We're still trying to tell people what to do, who to be, how to act, because we want to control other people and not allow God to speak through them and to live through them. In Deborah's time, the leaders were the men. They were the spiritual leaders. They were the ones who made all the decisions. And women were seen to be meek, mild, and obedient. They were seen to mother and to love. Women were seen to have more time to love God because they were at home, so they could worship God more. Seriously? Have you read the story of Deborah? If you haven't, I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. But this book of Judges talks about some of the judges in history. And judges were like charismatic political and military leaders. They had decisions to make like our judges, but they were military leaders. And They ruled over the tribes of Israel. And they kind of had this 200-year period that they ruled. But Deborah was already a judge. She'd already broken the norms. Yay, Deborah. And then, not only was she a judge, but then God spoke to her. Oh yeah, God spoke to her in a different way. And gave her instruction to give to the man. How do you think that went down? She didn't say, oh, you know what, after that, I got to find a way of doing this that the man might think it's their idea. She actually said, you know, to Barak, God has given me word for you to say, take 10,000 troops and go up to Mount Tabor, where God will help you and the Israelites to defeat Sisera. Now, Sisera was the Canaanite army chief, and he'd been oppressing Israel for years and years. So you can see this woman, judge, who did get to say quite a few things, went up to the general and said, you've got to turn around, get 10,000 men and go up this hill, and you're going to conquer this person. And what did he say? Because I guarantee you, he heard God in her voice. Because he didn't say, what are you on about, woman? He said, if you come with me, I will go. If you don't come with me, I won't go. He heard the voice of God speaking through this judge who is stepping outside of the norms. You know, we hear that there's a thing that says in their wife of Labrador. Thanks to Jackie for doing that reading today at the last minute. There was a lot of words in there. The wife of Labrador. Now, we don't actually know if she was married. Because the wife of Labrador can also be translated as woman of the torches. Or fiery woman. I kind of like that. You can call me Labrador from now on. So she may or may not have been a mother, but Barak said to her, come with me or else I'm not going. So if she was a mother, she again had to listen to God, leave behind her family and go forward into battle. She is an interesting character. She is a character that I love. Because she never left anything to chance. She was a warrior. And although women warriors wasn't impossible in this time, they were rare. And I think that there was a lot of art around that depicted women as warriors. But it's been lost. Or even hidden. Because then we would have seen the power of women in leadership. And so often we're told that women cannot be in leadership. Now, I want you to know that this is not a sermon that is about empowering all women. This is a sermon about empowering all people. Deborah is just an example, because the Bible gave us so many ways in which we see different people being called out of ordinary situations and becoming extraordinary people and serving God. Deborah is just an example. We may not understand the cultural norms of that time, but what we do understand if we listen is God's voice and God's action. Now, I've heard so many times people preaching that Jesus wants the women to stay in their seats. No wit. Carlos Rodriguez wrote this, and I found it and I just thought it was beautiful. Hear this. Dear church, Jesus protected women. Jesus empowered women, honoured women publicly, released the voice of women, confided in women, was funded by women, celebrated women by name and learned from women, respected women, and spoke of women as examples to follow. Your turn. Jesus didn't only speak for the women and protect the women or empower the women. Jesus spoke and protected every single person that was willing to hear his voice. He challenged those that weren't able to connect with God. You know, I want us to think about just for a moment how many times we judge or we put upon people what they should, can, can't do. Tall people, short people. What is the first thing that many people do when they see a tall, young man? Basketball. Do you know how hard that is for somebody who is tall to be asked continually, do you play basketball? And they can't play. How disempowering that is. Short people and children. It's disempowering to be continually told that you are too short. Jesus and God never did that. Jesus and God looked at you and said, you're beautiful. Just as you are. You do not need to grow another inch. Because just as you are is how I call you to be. What about quiet people and loud people? The introverts, the extroverts. How many of you in this room know everybody in this room? I doubt it. I doubt that you truly know everybody in this room. Because there are so many people in this room that are quiet that don't share of themselves unless they're in a smaller place. That don't want their stuff broadcast all over Facebook. And yet we make assumptions that because they're quiet, they're boring. They don't want to get involved. They don't have any gifts. And yet if they're loud, we assume that they're the most powerful people in this church. Let me tell you, that ain't the truth. There are some quiet people in this church that do incredible amounts of work. And God gave them gifts. We make assumptions all the time. And we could have made assumptions about Deborah the judge. That she should have been meek and mild, but she wasn't having it because God called her. God laid on her heart a plan, and God does that for each one of us. We do it with differently able people. How many people do you see when they have somebody with them that is in a wheelchair and they don't talk to the person in the wheelchair, they talk to the carer? Assuming that that person doesn't have their own voice. Assuming that person does not have gifts. It's called differently abled. We are all differently abled. Many of you know I am differently abled than Jonathan on the keyboard. I also know that there are others of you that if I placed you on that keyboard, you'd be even worse than me. When we meet and encounter people, we truly are called by God to honour them. So I want us to remember this Deborah story, that we could have made assumptions that all the heroes in the Bible were male, because that's what we're told so often. But when they're not. And so my challenge for us this week is to ask you, are you going to do what others expect of you? Because that's what society says. Or are you going to do what God calls of you? No matter how unusual that seems. Are you going to be the person that empowers other people to do exactly what they are called to do? Or are you going to limit other people's creativity? Because if you think that you're going to go from here and limit other people's creativity, you might want to rethink that one. Because that creativity comes from God. And if you limit that, you limit God. So will you be like Deborah and lead people forward? Or will you sit meekly in your seat and say, oh no, not me.